This is awkward. I never in a million years thought I would be doing this.
Refine us far. My heart's one desire is to be holy, set apart for you, Lord. I choose to be holy, set apart for you, my Master, ready to do your will.
Hi friends, I'm Katie. Welcome to Not Yet Refined. Like I said, I never in a million years thought I would be sitting in front of a camera. I've been spending years behind cameras, behind webcams, pushing buttons behind the scenes, and that's where I'm comfortable. I like the anonymity. I like the fact that there's no risk in making mistakes when nobody can see your face. There's a comfort to that, and it's easy to become complacent in that comfort, which is, I guess, part of the reason I'm here. And the reason I'm here is that I've become aware of the fact that it seems like there's a lack of ministry for a very specific reason on YouTube. And I want to try and help fill that void. But in order for you to understand where I'm coming from, I need to tell you some of my story. And like so many others, I can say that I was raised in a Christian home, and my parents did the best they could. And when I say I was raised in a Christian home, what I mean is I heard Bible stories at bedtime, and we went to church on Sundays semi-regularly. We were not there every weekend from what I can remember, but we were there fairly regularly. The thing is we would go from one church to another fairly consistently, because I don't remember there being more than maybe a year and a half that we would be at one church and then we'd move again. So there wasn't a certain level of consistency. And beyond attending church regularly and hearing the Bible at bedtime, faith didn't really factor into things. There wasn't times of prayer. There weren't discussions about faith or what was being read in scripture. And it was something that was done on Sundays. So it was there, but it wasn't an integral part of my life growing up. But I will say again, my parents did the best they could, and I give them full credit for that, because God met them where they were and made the best they could enough. And that to me is invaluable. So when I was about 4.5 or 5 years old, I remember sitting at the dining room table with my mom across the table from me. My dad was beside me, and we were eating mac and cheese. I know, wonderful dinner. But he had put enough pepper on it that it was making me almost sneeze. But I remember that was the night that, sitting at that table while everybody was eating, I acknowledged the fact that I needed Jesus in my life. Now, I'm not saying that everything was hunky-dory from then on out, because it wasn't. And I'm not saying that I fully understood what I was praying at that point in time, because I didn't. I was 4.5 or 5 years old. Child's understanding, but I knew I needed Jesus. And it was about that same time, that same age range, when I started experiencing sleep paralysis. Now, some of you that happen upon this video are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. Some of you have been blessed to not experience it, and you have no idea what I'm talking about. It's the sensation of waking up from a dead sleep, unable to move, and aware of the fact that there is a presence that is not human in the room with you. And to say it is terrifying is an understatement. Whether you're a child or an adult, it's something that you don't easily forget. It happened several times. I can't tell you exactly how many, but I know it was more than once. And it's at that point in time that God was able to use what my parents had attempted to instill into me, because I realized in the midst of that that I needed to cry out for Jesus. And I did. And immediately it stopped. And so as a child and as I was growing, I forgot about that for a period of time. And I continued on, and we continued to go from church to church and attend occasionally, most often, but we'd skip here and there. And it wasn't until I was 10 that we actually ended up at a church that we stayed there for a decent amount of time. And it was one of their summers that they were offering a summer camp for kids. Mom signed me up. And so here I am, about 10 years old, attending summer camp for the first time. Now, I'd been involved in other things where I camped away from home, so it wasn't traumatic or anything. I was game and I had a good time. And I remember that, there was plenty of time at the pool. There was the night hike. There was all kinds of arts and crafts, typical summer camp stuff. But there were two things that I carried with me from that summer camp. And one of them was a really seemingly random verse that I memorized there. And it has stuck with me throughout my entire life because, you'd expect a kid 10 years old to come back with John 3:16 memorized. Nope. I came back with Psalm 118:6 memorized. The Lord is on my side. I shall not fear. What can man do to me? 10-year-old. Okay, that seems a bit grown up for that type of verse, but that's the one that stuck. And at the same time, there was one night where things went off script, I'll say. There was one girl that was attending that she began to have a seizure. It was, of course, a time of worship in like the clubhouse or wherever we were gathered. And the counselors were obviously disturbed by this. And there were counselors gathered around waiting for the medical team to show up and everything. And of course, some of them were speaking and praying in tongues. And so as things, calmed down a little bit, everybody was sent back to their bunks. And the counselors were supposed to, manage things from there and continue ministering or doing whatever they needed to with their smaller groups. And so we're all back in the bunk, and there's a couple of girls that gather at the door. And it's obviously dark. You can't really see past the door much unless it's open and you just have that little puddle of light there. But they're standing there and they're pointing and they're sobbing. There is something seriously that is impacting them. And so, of course, girls being girls, one by one, they start walking over there to figure out, hey, what's going on? Let us in on the secret. What's up? More and more girls start sobbing. And so, of course, I get curious and I end up joining. It's like, what's going on? And basically they're like, oh, there's an angel there. Can't you see it? Right there in the trees. And I look out there and I see trees, darkness, stars. Where? I'm like, where? Show me where. I am not seeing this. And they point. Right there. Can't you see it? I couldn't see a thing. And I, of course, as a 10-year-old, didn't want to, at that point, announce to the world that I'm different. Oh, sure. Huh. And I walked back to my bunk and sat there. I never saw what they were pointing at, what was obviously impacting them. And I didn't know what to make of it. And I will tell you that I can recognize now that the enemy used that as a opportunity to take advantage of me for years. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't suspect it. But I can see now that he manipulated that. And so, continued the nominal Christian American life. And then I became a teenager. And boy, did I become a teenager. I was absolutely a goth. I dealt with suicidal ideation. I'm the one out of the goth group that they called the serious suicidal. So even my friends were like, nope, if anybody's going to be going to actually do it, it's her. That was me. And I decided that I was tired of the shallow believism that I was seeing. And I decided that perhaps there isn't anything to this. I did not identify as a Christian at that point. And I started reading a lot of things. If I had extra money, I was at the bookstore buying New Age and occult books because I was going to figure it out. I thought I was incredibly smart and I was going to make sense of things that didn't make sense in the world to me. And so I was reading a lot of things that I shouldn't have. And I even began to dabble. And thank God that he allowed me to rebel to a point. Because I will tell you that even now, even in the midst of the worst of my rebellion, there was always a boundary that I was unwilling to even discuss crossing. And I was always aware that it was there, that nope, I will not and cannot and will not even discuss doing these things. But the kiddie pool, kiddie pool's fair game. I mean, it got to the point where as an adult, I still had some of those books because I realized that they were dangerous. And when I got rid of them, I didn't have the ability to safely burn them. So they were ripped to shreds and then thrown in the trash can because I was going to make sure that regardless of how they were disposed of, they were not going to be in a state where they would benefit anybody. But moving on to when I was in my 20s, early 20s, I became very involved in online gaming. And I have a somewhat addictive personality, maybe evidenced by some of the books. But I became very, very addicted to the online gaming. And I had a full-time job. I had to pay my bills. I paid my bills. I was responsible in that aspect. But any time that I had that was free, I was in this game. And I was playing way later than I should have in order to be safely driving to work in the mornings. And it was just bad. But God was even able to meet me there. Because there were a couple of server events where players from across the server would gather in one location. And of course, these events are not short. They drag on sometimes. And so you get bored and you either walk away from the computer and do something else, or you stay there and you chat with people and you look at like their profiles or whatever, something to keep yourself occupied. I was one that I'd sit there and I'd chat and I would look at other player profiles to see what these people on the other side of the screen had customized or brought into the game of themselves. And I remember there was one in particular that I looked at and I had to scroll all the way down to the bottom because it was hidden a little bit. But all it said was one simple word, Christian. And I thought that was really awesome. And it kind of stuck with me. And I remembered that player from that point on. And he kind of stood out to me at that point. So fast forward a little bit more. And the game was having an in-person convention. And I was like, wow, that's only a couple of hours from where I live. And it's over a weekend, so I wouldn't miss work. I can do this. And so I purchased a ticket. I booked my hotel room. And I made plans. And I even got some of my guild that I was playing with at the time to agree to join. They were going to fly out too. Total strangers that I'd never met in person, but I knew them online. So totally safe, right? So we all end up at this convention. And I'll say it was in Las Vegas, Nevada, of all places. And so we're attending one of these speaker panels about the game. And I'm sitting there with one of the individuals from my guild who attended, and we're talking. And it just so happens, total coincidence, that the people sitting in the row directly in front of us are from the exact same server. Now, our server, compared to other ones, was one of the smallest ones. So the fact that we met people from the same server who we weren't even aware were attending is enough of a shock. And so they start rattling off their names and we give ours. And then as the panel's just about to begin, the player that I'm sitting with leans over and is like, I have no idea who these people are. I'm like, oh, well, it's so-and-so that plays such and such character. And I was able to go down the entire line. And the final one in line just so happened to be that player that had lodged in my brain because his profile said Christian. And so come to find out later that he'd supposedly spent the rest of the weekend trying to track me down at this conference or at this convention. And granted, the game that we played, there's hundreds of people there for multiple different games, but the one that we played only had, a small fraction of the people there. And then you go into the panels themselves and there's even fewer people in there. So should have been easy to find me, but for whatever reason, he couldn't find me the rest of the weekend. So we ended up starting to talk online. And a couple months, it might have been a couple weeks, couple months later, he actually types out a question. So are you a Christian? And I typed in yes, because of course, I was raised Christian. I live in America. Surely I'm Christian. That's when the Holy Spirit kind of grabbed. It was either a cinder block or a cast iron skillet. I can't for sure tell you what, and smacked me upside the head with it. I'm stubborn. I'm dense. Sometimes I need that. And I am eternally grateful for it. Because it was after I typed in yes that it became very clear to me, then why aren't you living like it? And I sat there for a second and I realized that he was absolutely 100% correct. I was not living like I was a Christian. I was not representing him well, and something had to change, and that something was me. So right then and there, I repented of everything that I could think of. I confessed my sins, and I acknowledged that I needed him, and I needed him to change me. And things changed. So I started getting serious about reading the Bible. I sought out skilled individuals who had proven themselves to be able to rightly divide the word of truth. I'm not saying I agree with everything that they've ever said. I don't. But I started to grow. And fast forward a couple of years, that guy that asked if I was a Christian online is my husband. And so we've been together on this crazy, wild ride since then that it's been amazing. And I can see God's hand through it. Do I have all the answers? No, absolutely not. I'm still growing. I'm still learning. I have a lot of learning to do. And yet I can see how God shaped me a certain way and God gave me certain desires that are supposed to be used to glorify him. And I need to figure out how best to do that in this crazy world. Because when I first started with the idea of going to college, because I'm a nobody, I really am. I love reading the Bible. I'm a girl with a Bible that loves to pray. I don't pray as much as I should, but I love to pray. I don't have any, letters after my name. I don't have any crazy accomplishments. I didn't graduate summa cum laude. I'm a nobody. I didn't even finish a bachelor's degree. I was going to college and I wanted to become, I wanted to major in clinical therapy and become involved in crisis intervention. But I never finished that. College got expensive and I needed to work a full-time job, and I couldn't juggle the cost of paying my bills and tuition. And I wasn't going to go into massive debt for it. So college fell by the wayside. And I can understand now part of the reason that God would have stopped me on that path of becoming a therapist and getting a degree in psychology. Do I understand all of it? Probably not. But I can at least say I understand at least in part. And so the reason I'm here, I'm editing this section because the first time I tried to record it, I was as clear as a mud puddle, and that is just not going to be sufficient. So what I'm hoping to accomplish with this, establishing this channel, is that it's going to become a place where it's safe to come and ask difficult questions, whether or not they line up with your denomination's different criteria, where you can ask questions that maybe have been nagging at you since you've been a child. And hopefully you'll find the encouragement and even the assistance that you need to dig into those things and to study them out and find out, what does the word really say about these things? I also hope that it's going to be a place where you'll find encouragement to not only read your Bible more, but to study it more in depth. Encouragement to pray more, to develop a vital and a just vibrant prayer life, where you'll find encouragement to stand firm and continue the fight, whatever that fight looks like in your life right now. And then when the time is correct, that you'll find the encouragement you need to step out as God is directing you individually to step out. So until next time, goodbye, friends.